quartet number 12. I think that the last movement.
Yeah, the minuet.
It's tempo di minuetto of quartet 12. So you're on quartet 12, and then we do.
Yes, this one.
Are we gonna do the repeats?
Yeah, let's do all the repeats.
Okay.
Hopefully it'll take up all our time. The rest of the time. Yeah. Okay, so we'll go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Jump back to this guy. Go back to page 9. We'll do that really short one. No just go through it. I guess we have to do the DCL framing. Okay.
Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to the Gold Star Hall ceremony. My name is Rita Case, and I am the director for the Military Affiliated Student Center. At this time, if you would please silence your cell phones and all electronic devices for the duration of the ceremony, I would like to get us started with a land acknowledgement statement. Iowa State University is located on ancestral lands and territory of the Bikoji or Iowa Nation. The United States obtained the land from the Meskwaki and Sauk nations in the Treaty of 1842. We wish to recognize our obligations to this land and to the people who took care of it, as well as the 17,000 native peoples who live in Iowa today. Now, if you are able, please rise for the presentation of colors by the ROTC Tri-Service Color Guard and our national anthem sung by Iowa State Assistant Teaching Professor Chad Sonka.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Carry colors. Right, face. Forward, march. Left, 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 right, left. Color guard. Halt. Right, face. Post. Colors. Center, face. Column left. March. Left, 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 left.
Thank you. You may be seated. In 1928, the doors of the Memorial Union opened to a living memorial for those who selflessly protect the freedoms of our country. The Gold Star Hall ceremony is our opportunity to celebrate the lives of the men and women who paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. Today, we come together to hear the stories of 3 Iowa State students who answered the call to serve our country and remember the impact of these incredible members of our Iowa State family. A tradition within the military that builds a sense of belonging is to present a coin, which signifies a person's connection to the organization. Iowa State University has designed a coin to honor this tradition and to help foster new connections. On one side of our coin is the gold star, with the words that are engraved in the Gold Star Hall, "For thee they died," reminding us of the sacrifice of those who have gone before us. The other side reads Iowa State University and the motto, "Learning to return services to those who served us." We'll have a coin available for viewing in the Oak Room following the ceremony. After the narratives of each of our honorees today, the co-interim directors of the Memorial Union, Brad Hill and Christine Heflin, will give each family a coin to keep. It is meant to demonstrate our commitment and to serve as a reminder to these honorees and always a part of us. We will continue to remember and respect each person whose name is inscribed on the walls of the Gold Star Hall. Dr. Wendy Winterstein became the 16th president of Iowa State University in 2017. She is the first woman and only second ISU graduate to hold the university's highest office. For more than 40 years, Dr. Winterstein has served Iowa State in several capacities, from Extension and Outreach Associate to the first endowed Dean of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. In her 6th year as president, she is advancing Iowa State as one of the most student-centric, leading research universities in the country, where all students, faculty, and staff can flourish. Please join me in welcoming President Wendy Winterstein.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you today to share my welcome to the annual Gold Star Hall ceremony. This year marks the 20th anniversary of this ceremony, an annual opportunity for reflection and reverence for the service and sacrifice made by our fellow Iowa Staters. It's a time to share our deep gratitude to our veterans and our current members of the armed services, and to recognize the family and friends who provide their love and support. Gold Star Hall stands as a living memorial to nearly 600 Iowa Staters who died serving World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Somalia, and the global war on terrorism. We are deeply indebted to all those who answered the call to serve. Today, we honor 3 Cyclones for their military service and for making the ultimate sacrifice to defend our freedom. Army Captain Thomas Henry Delamore, Marine Captain Alfred Hiram Agin, and Army First Lieutenant James Lee Miller. You will soon hear the stories of these men, of their time here on campus, and of their military service. Not unlike the students of today, these men worked hard in the classroom. They were involved in campus organizations. They were active in the community, and they believed in the importance of public service. These young men and all the individuals whose names are etched in Gold Star Hall deserve our respect and appreciation. We offer our deepest sympathies to the family and friends of these service members, and we take heart in knowing that their Cyclone spirit lives on in the walls of the Memorial Union. As you pass through Gold Star Hall, I encourage you to look up to the 12 stained glass windows. Each window depicts a virtue that represents what it means to be an Iowa Stater. They include learning, courage, faith, determination, love, loyalty, and integrity. I asked all members of the Iowa State community to join me in paying tribute to the men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice by living these virtues every day. Thank you for helping us honor our service members and for being part of this very special ceremony. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Lieutenant Colonel Eric Lopez of the United States Air Force and the commander of the Iowa State Air Force ROTC program.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all here. All right, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Eric Lopez from the Air Force ROTC program here at ISU. I'm in the unique role here today as both an active duty military commander and a member of the faculty. So it's through that lens that I want to share why today's ceremony is not only important, but necessary. First, I want to start with a sincere thank you to all of the family, friends, and loved ones in attendance. We recognize that your journey to this place in this moment could not have been easy, but today's ceremony is all the better for your presence. President Winterstein, thank you for your remarks, ma'am. The link between higher education and military service, especially in the leadership arena, can be easily overlooked or underestimated. Your words today remind us that a solid academic foundation is crucial to developing the leaders of character on which our military depends. In turn, we recognize the freedom to pursue an education at great institutions like this one are underwritten by the men and women who take the solemn oath to support and defend our Constitution, even if it means paying the ultimate price. My final thanks go to the members of the Gold Star Hall Committee, the Color Guard, and the Cadets Standing Watch while we spend this time together today. The Gold Star Hall Committee in particular works behind the scenes all year to find new honorees and share their stories so that their sacrifice is never forgotten. If not for their efforts to bring these stories to light, we would all carry on about our business, and the names on the walls in Gold Star Hall would be just that. Because of the committee and ceremonies like this one today, we get to know who they were, what they did, and the legacy they left behind. Now, I must confess, I'm not an Iowa Stater, but don't worry, I'm not from that other school out east either. I am proud, however, to be a part of this university now, and deeply appreciative of what this Memorial Union and the Gold Star Hall represent to my fellow service members, whether in an active, reserve, guard, separated, or retired status. When I arrived to this campus last summer and first visited the Memorial Union, I was immediately impressed by what I found after making my way around the Zodiac and through the doors into Gold Star Hall. The towering limestone walls with numerous names engraved on them reminded me of the permanence of the sacrifice they made. The sense of reverence created by the grandeur of the space forced me to be present in that moment, take in my surroundings, and reflect on the reasons why the university might construct a memorial of this nature. I quickly came to the conclusion that Iowa Staters care about their school, their state, their country, and most importantly, the brothers and sisters beside whom they toil in the classrooms, laboratories, fitness centers, and beyond to better themselves and their communities. It's obvious then that they would want to create a place right here in the heart of the campus for all to see that recognizes the heroes who studied here, and that also lets everyone know that Cyclones will never forget those who gave their all, that others may continue to follow their dreams. Now, with that, I'd like to invite Staff Sergeant Madison Liss, fellow airman, to the stage. Madison's a veteran, an Iowa State student, and president of the Student Veterans of America chapter here at Iowa State. Staff Sergeant Liss.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. As mentioned earlier, my name is Madison. I'm a staff sergeant in the Air Force. I've been in for about 4 years, but I didn't enlist right out of high school like everyone else kind of does in this situation. My first year of college, I played sports at Morningside College in Sioux City, Iowa, right across town from the 185th Air Refueling Wing, where I'm currently a member. When I was a junior in high school, I toured Morningside with my dad, and evidently I wound up at the 185th talking to the recruiter that was there. There was some part of me that knew that I wanted to be in the Air Force, I just didn't know in what capacity. So I went on and I played college volleyball, and I knew that the Air Force was still calling me. So what I ended up doing was I enlisted just a few short months after being into my second semester at Morningside. And I still to this day don't really know what called me there. I think that it had something to do with watching my dad go to drill once a month from the moment I was a little girl, and thinking that he was just kind of the coolest person ever. Watching him go through 2 deployments and still coming home, that was something that was really motivational and important to me. Maybe it was wanting to be part of something that was bigger than myself, or maybe it was just because I think airplanes are really cool. Either way, being part of the military is easily one of the best experiences of my life. Many of us that are in the military or have been in know that we meet some lifelong friends through the military. Many of us lean on them when we are away from our own. They are rocks when we need them, and are people we make jokes with during our time away from home, and they're the people who support us without knowing us that well or without question. Creating bonds like that in the military are irreplaceable, and I'm lucky enough to have made those friendships in my last 4 years, especially on my deployment last year to Kuwait. And I'm twice as lucky to still have those friendships today and have friendships in the Military Affiliated Student Center here on campus with other veterans. Being a student veteran or prior service student member is a unique position because we all have a lot of different experiences than our classmates around us. We might struggle to readjust and be students again. We might be a lot older than our peers, and we might think a lot differently. Sometimes we feel as though we don't belong. The military community and presence on campus amazed me the first time I took a visit here to Iowa State. And I'll be honest, I am not an Iowa State fan by nature either. But I'm definitely not a fan of the gold and black team out east. The Military Affiliated Student Center was something that was really amazing to me at first. We were still stuck in a little corner in the back of the Memorial Union, but there were just a huge group of people there who spoke the same language as me, and that was really important, finding my community here on campus. It helped my transition, and it's really important to understand that there are other people who are going through what you are as well. Every day when I come to the Mask, I do pass through the hall that is right outside these doors. Over the years that I've been at Iowa State, the hall has changed a little at a time. There are names that have been added to the walls more permanently. There was a war that ended in the last 4 years since I've been here, and those names are more permanent. And coming back from my deployment, I am reminded of those who came before me, those who will come after me, and I am proud to be part of the Iowa State legacy. That hall also reminds me that not everyone has a traditional path after high school, and having people who are at Iowa State that can support you in whatever way possible is what makes Iowa State and this ceremony so different and so amazing. As I walk through the hall, I am always reminded of others who put everything on the line, have paid the ultimate price, and I'm happy to serve alongside them.
Today we will share remembrances of 3 Iowa State students who gave their lives for this country. Retired Navy Commander Daniel Burr will speak about Army Captain Thomas Dellimore. Retired Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Daniel P. Devine will speak about Marine Captain Alfred Hiram Agan. And finally, Marine Corps Sergeant Jeremy Jacobson will speak about Army First Class James Lee Miller.
There's a lot more people out there today, so thank you everyone that came here. It seems like every year we step up our game a little bit more, and I'm not sure if it's because the president's here or we're giving class credit, but regardless, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. To be able to speak at this, it's very heartfelt for the speakers and the guests too. And as we read through Thomas Dellimore's history, we all kind of dig into who they were and what their families, what it meant to them to lose their sons and daughters, right? And in this story, it's not unlike my own family's story. We lost twins in World War II in B-17s over Germany. And so I got to see my own family kind of struggle and try to patch those holes, right? And I saw the same thing with researching the Dellimores as they had gone back and kind of relived the past and where they had gone and where they were lost. And so this is just a little opportunity for us to kind of bring to light the sacrifice. And so I really appreciate the ability to come up here and talk about Thomas Henry Dellimore. And also, they're online today. They had some trips that had come up, and so I definitely want them to know that this is an opportunity for also me to relate to them. And it's kind of fun that they also grew up in the same area that I grew up near Fort Dodge, Iowa. They also had twins that sacrificed in the war. So there's a lot in here, a lot more than I get to read the words. So I'll give it my best shot. So Thomas Henry Dellimore left Iowa to join the United States Army on December 1st, 1939 during World War II. As his primary placement, he served in the Philippines at the headquarters of the Far East Army Forces. But 27 years before his Army service, his life began the day after Christmas on December 26, 1912, in Clare, Iowa, west of Fort Dodge. His parents were Henry and Margaret Thomas, and he had 2 siblings who were fraternal twins, Donald and Dorothy, born in 1919. Thomas and his younger brother Donald were quite opposites. It seems that Donald would have been described as the life of the party, while Thomas was more reserved. Thomas graduated right here from Ames High in 1930 before attending the Culver Military Academy in Indiana. Donald worked for Prudential Life Insurance before following his older brother into the military. Intermittently throughout the years of 1931 to 1938, large span, Thomas would have been found attending Iowa State College. He began his studies in mechanical engineering. However, in 1936, he changed his coursework to agricultural engineering. Though he was not able to complete his degree, he did earn a commission as a second lieutenant through the Iowa State's ROTC program and was called immediately to active duty. Interesting, Dellamore began his military career with the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, a vital training ground for junior officers. This was during the Great Depression, and the CCC was an important employment program that kept many families intact during those tough years. Thomas was eventually put in charge as a commander of CCC camps in Missouri Valley and Lakeview, Iowa. He then transitioned to the Army as a company commander and supply officer in the 18th Engineer Battalion in Fort Devon, Massachusetts. The Army Corps of Engineers started to mobilize after the German invasion of France in the middle of 1940. Lieutenant Dellamore was a company commander of the 3rd Engineer Regiment as a member of the Hawaiian Department staff. From Hawaii, he was transferred to the Philippines in an effort to help expand Nichols Airfield. Among the many projects completed by the Army Corps, this was arguably the most difficult for the engineers. However, most of the personnel that were chosen with entrusted by the assignment at the time was described by Private Clarence Kinzer that living in Hawaii was both expensive and confining, like living on a rock. The Hawaiian Department chose Thomas as one of 4 officers to command the newly formed 809th Engineer Battalion. All officers had chosen bachelor's degrees in the technical fields, and a few had masters. In total, 80 men were chosen and gathered from 2 companies of the Hawaiian Regiment. They sailed on the USS President Taft as it departed on June 21st, 1941, taking with them only clothing and mess supplies. Dellamore was promoted to the rank of first lieutenant 5 days later on June 26, 1941, as the 809th was en route to Manila. Therefore, he was devoted to making a career out of being a soldier and never married. Thomas arrived in the Philippines on July 1st, 1941, in the U.S. Army Engineer Unit. He was the adjutant, the administrative officer, and the supply officer. For many, arrival in the Philippines brought an adjustment to the tropical environment. During the first few days, many endured sickness such as diarrhea and vomiting due to heavily chlorinated water. By November 1941, mud and sinkholes were found to be frequent problems and sources of delays on the airfield project. Throughout the coming months, the 809th also built machine gun turrets, first in holes dug by the group, and then in bomb craters left by the Japanese. Dedicated work and devotion by the 809th Engineer Battalion went into Nichols Field. But as conditions deteriorated, they began removing machine guns from junked airplanes and welding them in place to protect against Japanese strafing attacks. It was mid-November when the War Department decided to integrate the 809th Engineer Battalion with the 803rd Engineer Aviation Battalion, better known as Company C, the battalion's 3rd lettered company. Lieutenant Dellamore was promoted to captain during this integration process. During the soldiers' time at Nichols Field, they both worked hard and played hard, as you might suspect. However, Private James Onofre, a mechanic with the 13th Pursuit Squadron, noted that when it came to war and action, they were very serious. Nichols Airfield endured at least 11 Japanese air raids. The engineers' last-ditch defenses were not enough, and the airfield was evacuated the day before Christmas on December 24th. Company C of the 809th demolished aircraft and buildings and set gasoline on fire to scuttle the base, depriving the invading Japanese of any war material. Delamore wanted to fly the last operable plane out, but could not get permission to do so. As Company C left the base on Christmas Day, they blew up all the remaining bombs on the base and blew up the underground gasoline tanks at the service stations in Manila. The convoy had Christmas while on the road to Bataan. Delamore and a small detachment of about 4 people were ordered to stay behind. During this time, they were charged with destroying railroads, bridges, refineries, ports, and other structures that the Japanese could use to capture the Philippines. Delamore and his small detachment of men, who were once in charge of building new air bases, were now in charge of blowing those same bases up. They were responsible for cratering airfields and blowing up airplanes, hangars, and fuel. Delamore gained a reputation and respect among the men of Company C for being a risk taker in his destruction practices. After all the airfields were destroyed, Delamore was instructed to destroy many of the abandoned naval bases scattered throughout the island. Delamore's platoon left Manila to the Japanese after all the ordered equipment had been destroyed and crossed to Manila Bay to the Bataan Peninsula, arriving on January 3rd, 1942. At noon on January 15th, Japanese Mitsubishi Ki-30 light dive bombers attacked the Bataan field. Lieutenants James Caldwell, Theodore Pfluger, Thomas Delamore, and Private First Class Clarence Kinzer were on the airstrip at the time to inspect for repairs. Pfluger and Delamore were able to evade the attack, and Caldwell was killed while attempting to find cover, and Kinzer sustained injuries. On January 17th, a late afternoon raid damaged the runway and halted operations. Delamore and the other members of Company C continuously labored to repair and reconstruct the runway after the Japanese strikes. Crews would not be able to hear the noise of incoming fighters because of the sounds of all the construction equipment. As a result, when the attack started, the workers would hide behind and under the machinery. They were sitting ducks in the middle of the open field. Japanese dive bombers would attack 3 and 4 times per week during the first 2 months of operations at Bataan Field, in formations of 3, 9, and even 18 planes. War on Bataan was nothing short of deadly. Thomas was eventually taken as a prisoner of war following the Japanese full invasion in April of 1942 and imprisoned on the islands until December of 1944. Thereafter, he was put on board the Oroku Maru along with 1,600 other prisoners for transport to Japan. Prisoners on these infamous hell ships perished from disease, hunger, dehydration, and cruel treatment, or they drowned when the ships were sunk. Delamore lost all his belongings when he was taken prisoner, left only with the clothes on his back. Several weeks later, there was an attack on the ship as it was en route to Taiwan with the original 1,600 prisoners, and only 450 survived. Records indicate that Captain Delamore died during this attack. His remains could not be identified following the war, and he is still unaccounted for. His death has been recorded as January 9th, 1945, along with many, many others. Thomas's younger brother, Donald, serving as a bombardier in the European theater, also died in 1945 on a flight over Italy, just a week before the Germans surrendered. It is not difficult to imagine the heartbreak back in Iowa as Henry and Margaret lost both their sons to the war. Today, Captain Thomas Delamore is memorialized in the Philippines on the walls of the missing at the Manila American Cemetery. His name is also memorialized in the Punchbowl National Cemetery on Oahu, Hawaii. He was awarded various medals, including the Purple Heart, the Distinguished Service Cross, the Legion of Merit, and many more. In 1946, in Tokyo, General Douglas MacArthur ordered the International Military Tribunal for the Far East to be convened on April 29, 1946. Over the next 2 years, the tribunal put leaders from the Empire of Japan on trial for charges of conspiracy to start and wage war. Arrests were initiated for 28 Japanese leaders who faced charges for war crimes, crimes committed against prisoners of war, and crimes against humanity. Ultimately, many Japanese officials were made to account for their actions. These trials created a new standard of international justice. Since the end of World War II, heads of state and military leaders know they will face accountability for their actions if they violate the Charter of Human Rights. The post-war world proved that no individual, in spite of the power they may hold, would ever fully avoid accountability of that rule of law. Today we are gathered for both Thomas and Donald. As remembered, the Delamores are thanked for their service graciously. And since the Delamores are not here, I please ask that we all rise in honor of the Delamore family. Thank you. Thank you. Please be seated.
It is truly an honor to be here today, and as Commander Dan Burr mentioned, I am going to be in so much trouble later today. We find ties to our fellow people we're reading about. And I was actually, as I was reading up on stuff yesterday and today, I had Liberty in Sasebo, Japan, where in early January 1951, who we're going to read about, was also in Liberty in Sasebo, Japan. I was infantry, and I appreciated the flyboys and their support they gave us. The economy in Sheraton, Iowa, has always been largely agricultural and rural, with farm fields surrounded by rolling hills, woodlands, and beautiful prairie. But a mile south, Sheraton Point can be found. It is a native landmark on a pioneer trail that followed a high ridge across south central Iowa, dividing the watersheds of the Des Moines and Mississippi rivers and the Sheraton and the Missouri rivers. This was the birthplace of Alfred Hiram Agan. He was born on July 6, 1919, to Samuel and Alda Agan, the fourth child following siblings Maxine, Norma, and Donald. Alfred graduated from Sheraton High and was a participant and representative of the band throughout. The whole family was very engaged in the community and was active in the Episcopal Church in town. It was said that church members strive to live by Christ's message and that there shall be no outcasts, and that all are welcome. Diversity was cherished. The same St. Andrew's Episcopal Church attended by the Agans remains active today. At the church are records dating from 1932, indicating that Alfred spent a handful of years as a Des Moines Register and Tribune carrier and salesman in the Sheraton area, interacting with community members and providing important news and information. He was awarded a scholarship in 1937 through the Tribune for having outstanding high school studies, citizenship, and business efficiency. In 1945, Alfred married Mary Louise Mann Morgan, who was originally from Sigourney, Iowa, although the two had met in Sheraton. Alfred and Mary had two sons, Frederick Michael, born in 1946, and Richard in 1949. Alfred entered the military in December of 1942, serving in the Marine Corps as a Marine pilot in the Pacific Theater, and served all the way to the end. For his first assignment, he flew a Marine torpedo bomber in the Central Solomons. His duties include hazardous aerial mine-laying operations of the Japanese harbors. Agan was then stationed aboard the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Essex. Captain Agan was the first Marine pilot to use a proximity fuse. A proximity fuse developed during the war was one that would cause the explosive device to go off not when it contacted, but when it was near its target. As a member of the 1st Carrier-Based Marine Air Unit of the war, He was among those of the naval forces that struck Tokyo on 3 occasions. He was recognized as being one of the first groups to bomb the Japanese islands and was awarded 2 air medals during his time in the Pacific. After his initial discharge in 1945, he was able to return to school from the years 1945 to 1948. And that should pause us to remember of words of our introduction here earlier from a fellow student who served and then came back to Iowa State, and she mentioned herself that it was a little bit of a challenge being older. I'm sure back in 1945, Mr. Egan found the same. He attended Iowa State and successfully graduated with a bachelor's degree in architectural engineering. In the 1948 edition of the BOM, Iowa State's yearbook, he was part of the AIA student organization, the American Institute of Architects. The group's funhouse booth took second place honors at the Engineers Carnival. Besides helping with Visha Open House, the organization held an annual spring picnic for its members and their guests. After his graduation, Alfred found himself in San Diego and was employed by an architectural firm prior to the Korean War. He was a captain in the Marine Corps Reserve at the time. It was only 3 weeks into the war when he was called back to active duty in September of 1950. Mary and the 2 boys went to live with her parents back in Sheraton, Iowa. When called back, Alfred became the pilot of an F-4U Corsair fighter with Marine Fighter Squadron VMF 212. He was part of Marine Air Group 33 on the carrier USS Baton. His squadron was famously known as the Black Sheep Squadron, and it included pilots who were some of the most experienced of the war. On January 20th, 1951, Captain Egan was forced to ditch his aircraft in water approximately 1 mile from land and 13 miles south of Incheon, Korea. Captain Egan's aircraft, it is believed, was struck by his own bomb blast while making an attack against enemy positions 11 miles southeast of Incheon. Captain Egan was able to make a normal water landing and was observed climbing out of the aircraft, inflating his life vest and swimming towards land. However, the water temperature, as reported in official records, was 35 degrees, and the air temperature was only 20. The rescue helicopter arrived 1 hour, 10 minutes later. Rescue was also hampered by high winds and rough seas. Upon being rescued, he was found to already have passed away from exposure. His official death is listed as killed in action on January 20th, 1951 in South Korea. He was 31 years old. At the time of Alfred's death, Michael was 5 and Richard was only 2. Both were too young to have any recollections of their father. While Alfred was called to active duty, Mary had earned her bachelor's at Iowa State within applied art. She later studied for her master's in education at the University of Illinois. Throughout her life, she held many professional positions. She was a graphic designer for an aircraft company, a real estate agent, and a public school art instructor. Her last position, however, was here at Iowa State University, where she was an art education professor. Much of Alfred's heart remains in his hometown of Sheraton, though he's memorialized at Fort Rosecrans National Cemetery in San Diego, California. Fort Rosecrans is a national cemetery administered to the Veterans Affairs. Egan is also remembered at the Korean War Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., and today he has been memorialized here. Captain Egan was awarded various medals. Along with the 2 air medals, he was also awarded the Purple Heart, the National Defense Service Medal, and the Marine Corps Good Conduct Medal. Alfred Egan is one of a group of approximately 200,000 servicemen and women who served in both World War II and in the Korean War. These servicemen and women are often referred to as double veterans. They faced unique challenges when called out of civilian life as older adults to return to military service. And yet, Egan and his comrades answered the call to service, the call to help defend the freedoms of an important ally. For that, we and the people of the nation of South Korea will forever be grateful. We are pleased to have here with us today Captain Agan's two sons, Michael and Richard. Along with Michael and Richard, their stepsister is also here today and her husband. Would you please stand and be recognized? Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Devine and Commander Burr. I share in their sentiments that it is an honor to be here this evening. I had the privilege of visiting with some of James Lee Miller's former roommates and dorm mates, and meeting the family, John Miller and his wife here this evening, and it is an honor to present his story. I want you all to know that, and I take it very seriously. On New Year's Eve, December 31st, 1938, James Lee Miller's parents, Bill and Dorothy Miller, joined their lives together in marriage. Bill was born in Cresco, Iowa, in the northeast corner of the state, and his family later moved to South Maquoketa. Dorothy was born in Vandalia, Illinois, and her family also moved to Maquoketa, where she went to high school and met Bill. They lived in Maquoketa for several years. During World War II, Bill served with the U.S. Army in Italy as a member of the Blue Devils, the 88th Infantry Division. Bill and Dorothy had two sons. The first was James Lee Miller, known as Jim, born on June 25th, 1943. 5 years later, Jim was joined by his brother, John, born on December 6, 1948. While growing up, Jim's family moved around quite a bit. His father, Bill, was a carpenter and later a construction project manager. After World War II, Bill was working for the DuPont Company in Clinton, Iowa. DuPont transferred Bill to Sellersburg, Indiana in 1952 to work at the Indiana Ordnance Works, a munitions factory for the U.S. government, to support the Korean War. Jim and John were close playmates through his time. It was when Jim started school, and later, 5 years after, John started school, and their lives moved in different circles. Jim started his path through school at an elementary school in Maquoketa, Iowa. When the family moved to southern Indiana, Jim attended the Stout Elementary School in Sellersburg, Indiana. John joined Jim at Stout in 1954. Jim was in 6th grade and John was in 1st grade. Jim's high school career began at Silver Creek High School in Speed, Indiana. He there developed a passion for basketball and would carry it with him through his high school career. In the summer of 1959, the family moved to Tercia Island in Azores. They initially lived in the city of Angra de Hirosma, the capital of the island. When school started, they moved into housing on the Lajes Air Force Base. There, Bill Miller oversaw the building of a new airmen's dormitory and lengthening of one of the base's runways. Lajes was a joint forces base involving the Portuguese Air Force Base, U.S. Air Force, and U.S. Navy. In the Azores, Jim completed the 11th grade in World War II Quonset huts that were converted into classrooms. In the summer of 1960, his family traveled through Portugal, Spain, France, and Canada. After their sojourn in Europe, the family settled in Randallstown, Maryland, west of Baltimore. Bill had taken a job with Baltimore contractors and helped build the Baltimore Civic Center, later renovated and known as the CFG Bank Arena today. This was in 1961 when Jim completed his senior year at Milford High School. The family then moved again in May to West Friendship, Maryland. Jim started his freshman year at Iowa State University in September. He was enrolled in industrial administration and became a member of the Army ROTC. Given his many years of moving and starting over in new places, Jim knew how to become involved in each community he found himself a part of. While a student in Ames, Jim was a resident of the Griffith House in the Westgate dormitory. He developed close friendships, and some of his housemates frequently went home with them for the weekends and holidays rather than travel back to Maryland. During his years in Indiana and Maryland, Jim developed a love for hunting and fishing. So when he went home with his housemates, he enjoyed the great outdoors of hunting and fishing in Iowa. Jim was not at Iowa State for too long before he found himself back home in Maryland. Jim took up working in construction while taking classes at Catonsville Community College. In January 1963, his father had been called back to work for DuPont to supervise a major expansion of their nylon plant in Seaford, Delaware. Dorothy and John moved to Seaford in March of 1963, but Jim chose to stay in Maryland to continue his schooling and work on construction. In June of 1963, Bill took a job with RCA at the U.S. Air Force Ballistic Missile Early Warning System in Clear, Alaska, as the site's construction and maintenance manager. Dorothy and John stayed in Seaford while John attended his sophomore year in high school, and Jim continued his education in Maryland. In 1964, Dorothy, Jim, and John drove the family car from Seaford, Delaware, to the small town of Nenana, Alaska. Dorothy and Jim drove 4,300 miles from Seaford up the Alaskan Highway. That's quite a drive. In 1964, this highway was not yet paved, and it was a gravel road most of the way. John couldn't help because he didn't have his driver's license yet. The family had rented a mobile home and planned to spend a summer in Nenana, Alaska. They arrived on June 20th, and the next day attended a family picnic on the Air Force site at midnight because there it was still daylight. Jim worked that summer at the construction site and fell in love with Alaska and the hunting and fishing opportunities that he found there. Jim chose not to return to the lower 48 at the end of that summer. John and Dorothy drove back to Delaware for the school year. Jim enrolled in the University of Alaska, majoring in business administration, and graduated in 1966. While at the University of Alaska, Jim also enrolled in the Army ROTC unit on campus. Achieving the rank of cadet major, he was the executive officer for the unit and received the Distinguished Military Student Award with his experience. He had found his new calling. He wanted to make a career out of the Army. In 1966, he received an official Army commission. Jim went through advanced infantry training at Fort Benning, Georgia, going on to an Army Ranger training course. He remained at Fort Benning until he was deployed to Vietnam. Just before his deployment, he went home to Seaford, Delaware, to visit his parents. He stopped into Ames to visit his brother John, who was a sophomore at ISU majoring in engineering science that fall. John was living in Wallace Hall at the Towers. Jim had earned his private license through ROTC while at the University of Alaska. Jim rented a plane. They flew around Ames for a couple of hours. Wonderful memory. Jim was assigned as a platoon leader for the 1st Platoon of Company C, 4th Battalion, 9th Infantry of the 25th Infantry Division in Vietnam. He reported to his unit in the Cu Chi area of October 10th, 1967, northwest of the city of Saigon, or Ho Chi Minh City as it is today. This was the base camp for the 25th Infantry Division. His first letter home indicated he was so tired the first night from traveling straight through from Ames to Saigon that he'd slept through an artillery barrage that was landing a mere 200 meters away. So Jim was promoted to first lieutenant in early October of 1967. Later, his unit moved to the region around Tay Ninh, Vietnam, which is approximately 50 miles northwest of the city of Saigon. His last known activity was penetrating the perimeter of enemy base camp, 10 kilometer west-northwest of Kadam Airfield. His platoon was in the reserve to support another platoon leading into the area. The forward platoon came under heavy mortar attack and suffered many casualties. Jim, his radio telephone operator, moved forward to take command of the remaining troops and withdraw them to a safer position. However, during this maneuver, Jim suffered major shrapnel wounds and died on December 14th, 1967, in the Vietnam 45th Surgical Hospital. His brother John said, when Jim was in college before he was commissioned to go into the Army, he said his first choice was Vietnam because it was something he had to do. I can resonate with that as a veteran, and most everyone in here that served can resonate with that. Something he had to do. He had fully intended to make a career in the Army. Other soldiers that served with Jim and John had communicated with belief that he would have done well in the service and excelled. Jim was buried in Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia, and his name is on a Vietnam Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C. He was awarded the Bronze Star and Purple Heart, among other medals. Jim's determination and desire to succeed, in combination with his ability to adapt to each new situation and each new location, made him very much a global citizen. Thinking about these attributes, it is easy to be inspired by Jim and his ambition to take on a leadership role in a complex world. Here today to honor Jim is his brother John from Delaware, an ISU alum also, along with his wife Joanne and her brother, a retired lieutenant colonel, and his wife, and several floor mates from the Griffith House. Would those that are here for James Miller please rise and be recognized?
Thank you to all of our readers who shared these stories. Let's honor and remember those stories with a moment of silence. We will close our ceremony with a final reading of names. Thomas Henry Delamore, Alfred Hiram Agan, James Lee Miller. Please rise for the playing of taps and the retiring of colors. May all be seated again. It is a privilege to get to work in this incredible building. In partnership with the Memorial Union staff, my department, the Military Affiliated Student Center, works together with the MU to ensure our veterans and our military students know that Iowa State is a place for them, a place that embraces them for who they are. I often say that I have the best job on campus, and quite frankly, it's true. I get to work with those who honorably serve our country, to our country's heroes. Now, I know some of my students are around here and they just cringed with me, but it's true. I get to work with the most incredible students, and they're humble. They won't always tell you their stories, but I get to hear a little bit. And I can tell you, our students have sacrificed so much, and they're still here getting their education. Many of them are still serving in the military, in the National Guard and reserves. They're veterans, and they're just incredible. And I am so grateful for this building and for this ceremony, because as I said, it represents that the Iowa State recognizes service, and that is something unique that you don't see at every university, and it truly is a privilege. Thank you. I'd like to thank the Gold Star Hall Committee for their work to help plan this ceremony. All the committee members are listed on the presentation slide. A special thank you to Kira Ortiz, our Gold Star Hall research assistant, for her many hours of hard work, writing, interviews of all of our honorees so that we could tell their stories. Guests are invited to view the names of our honorees in the Gold Star Hall, and there are displays about the honorees in the Oak Room. So please join us for a small reception here in the Great Hall. And then later tonight, well, not that late, at 6 p.m. here in the Great Hall, the ISU Lectures program, along with my department, the Military Affiliated Student Center, will host the 2023 Gold Star Hall Ceremony Lecture titled Legacies of All Volunteer Force 50 Years On. Amy Rettenberg, who is an associate professor of history, will deliver the lecture, which will focus on the 50th anniversary of the end of the American Draft and the legacies of the all-volunteer force. So this lecture is free and open to the public, so I hope you'll stick around and join us. But in the meantime, be sure to enjoy some of the food in the back. Thank you.